The Velani were dying, and the galaxy did not care. Ambassador Rilo stood at the great window of his quarters, watching the orange flames spread across the horizon of his homeworld. The capital city of Velin Prime had been beautiful once. Tall crystal towers had reached toward the purple sky. Gardens filled with singing flowers had stretched for miles in every direction. Children had played in the streets without fear. Now there was only fire and death. Rilo was old by Velani standards. His golden eyes had seen 112 cycles around their sun. His thin body was bent with age and his luminous skin had faded to a dull silver. But he had never seen anything like this. No Velani had. His people had lived in peace for 300 cycles. They had no word for war in their language. They had no soldiers, no weapons, no concept of organized violence. And that was why they were dying. The Krath swarm had arrived without warning. Their bioships had darkened the sky like a plague of insects. Millions upon millions of living vessels, each one carrying thousands of warriors bred for one purpose only: to consume, to destroy, to spread. The outer colonies had fallen first. Rilo had watched the reports come in with growing horror. Velin 3, gone in a single day. Velin 7, destroyed before the evacuation ships could even launch. The mining stations, the research outposts, the peaceful trading ports where his people had welcomed travelers from across the galaxy. All gone, all consumed by the swarm. Now the Krath had come to Velin Prime itself, the homeworld, the heart of everything his people had built over thousands of years. Rilo turned away from the window. He could not bear to watch anymore. Instead, he walked to the communication console in the center of his quarters. His hands trembled as he activated the device. This was their last hope, their only chance. The Galactic Assembly. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the great chamber where representatives from 100 species gathered to discuss matters of importance. Rilo had spoken to this assembly many times before. He had negotiated trade agreements. He had proposed cultural exchanges. He had always been calm, measured, diplomatic. Today he would beg. "Honored members of the assembly," Rilo began, his voice cracking with emotion. "I come before you not as an ambassador but as a father, a grandfather, a citizen of a world that will not exist by tomorrow if we do not receive help." The faces on the display showed little emotion. The Taurani, with their stone-like features, remained expressionless. The Masari, tall and covered in blue scales, whispered among themselves. The Orvex, insectoid beings with compound eyes, simply stared. Rilo continued, desperation making his words tumble out faster than he intended. "The Krath swarm has destroyed everything we have. 12 billion Velani have already died. Our fleet is gone. Our defenses have failed. We are not warriors. We have never been warriors. We do not know how to fight." He paused, struggling to maintain his composure. "Please, we are begging you, send ships, send soldiers, send anything. Our children are dying in the streets. Our elders are being hunted like animals. We have nothing left to offer you except our gratitude and our friendship for all time." Silence filled the chamber. Finally, the Taurani speaker rose. His voice was cold and hard like the rock his people resembled. "The Taurani Empire regrets the situation facing the Velani people. However, we must maintain our neutrality in this conflict. We cannot risk drawing the attention of the swarm to our own worlds." Rilo felt his heart sink. "Please, honored speaker, we are not asking you to fight a war. Just help us evacuate our people, save our children." "The answer is no." The Masari representative spoke next. "The Masari Collective sympathizes with your plight, Ambassador. However, our resources are limited. We cannot spare ships for a conflict that does not concern us." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy refused. Some offered sympathy. Some offered prayers. Some simply looked away, unwilling to meet Rilo's desperate eyes. The Orvex delegation walked out without saying a word. Rilo felt tears streaming down his face, golden tears that sparkled in the light of the holographic display. He had failed. His people would die, and the galaxy would do nothing. Then a voice spoke from the back of the chamber. "We will help." Rilo looked up, confused. The voice had come from a section of the chamber he barely recognized. A small delegation, seated in the shadows, far from the powerful species at the center. They were short creatures, soft-looking, with round faces and dark eyes. Rilo searched his memory and found nothing. He did not know these beings. "Who speaks?" the Torani demanded. A figure stepped forward into the light. He wore a uniform of dark blue with golden symbols on his shoulders. His hair was black, his skin pale, and his eyes held something Rilo could not identify, something hard and cold and very, very old. "I am Admiral Kang T of the United Earth Fleet," the creature said. "We represent humanity, and we will help the Velani." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Masari laughed, a high bubbling sound. "Humanity, the young species from the Sol system, you have been among the stars for barely a century. What could you possibly do against the Krath swarm?" Admiral T did not smile. His face remained still like carved stone. "You would be surprised what we can do." The message reached Earth 3 hours later. Commander Park Sue received it in the Operations Center of Luna Base, the primary military installation of the United Earth Fleet. She was a woman of 42 years, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. Her black hair was cut short in the military style, and her uniform bore the marks of 20 years of service. She read the message twice, then a third time. Her hands did not shake. Her face showed no emotion. But inside, something ancient and terrible began to wake up. "Get me Admiral T on a secure channel," she said to her communications officer. "Priority 1. The young officer, Lieutenant Chomina, looked up with curious eyes. "Ma'am, what is happening?" Sue turned to face the main display, which showed the peaceful blue sphere of Earth hanging in the blackness of space. For 60 years, humanity had been at peace. The last great war had ended before most people alive today were born. The weapons had been locked away. The warships had been mothballed. The soldiers had become peacekeepers and aid workers. But the wolves had never truly gone to sleep. "What is happening, Lieutenant?" Sue said quietly. "Is that humanity is going to war." Across the solar system, the signal spread. To the hidden bases on Mars, to the deep space stations at the edge of the heliosphere, to the classified facilities buried beneath the mountains of Earth itself. Men and women who had spent their careers hopping this day would never come receive their orders and began to move. Admiral T's face appeared on the main display. He looked tired but determined. Behind him, Sue could see the stars of the Velani system. "Commander Sue," he said, "I assume you received my message." "I did, Admiral. The Assembly refused to help." "Every single one of them." T's jaw tightened. "They are going to let an entire species die because they are too afraid to act." Sue nodded slowly. "And we are not afraid." For the first time, something like a smile crossed T's face, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had scented prey. "No, Commander, we are not afraid, we are angry." He leaned forward, his dark eyes burning with intensity. "Wake the fleet, all of it, every ship we have. I want combat readiness within 72 hours. Sue felt her heart beating faster. "Admiral, the Assembly will not approve this action. They have already declared neutrality." "I do not care about the Assembly," T said. "The Velani asked for help, they will get it." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft but filled with iron. "Tell the crews that we are going hunting, and God help anything that gets in our way." The connection ended. Sue stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. Then she turned to face her staff, who were watching her with wide eyes. Young men and women who had never known war, who had grown up in a galaxy that thought humans were soft and weak and harmless. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. "You heard the Admiral," Sue said, her voice calm and steady. "Wake the wolves, we have work to do." And deep beneath the surface of Luna, in hangars that had been sealed for 60 years, the old warships began to stir. The hangars beneath Luna had been silent for 60 years. Dust covered everything. The lights had been turned off for so long that the fixtures had become homes for spider-like cleaning robots that had run out of power decades ago. The air was cold and still, recycled by ancient machines that barely remembered their purpose. But when Captain Yoon Hana stepped through the massive blast doors, she felt something stir in the darkness. Something old and dangerous and very, very patient. She was a woman of 35 years, with a face that showed the marks of hard service. A scar ran across her left cheek, a reminder of a border skirmish that the official reports had called a training accident. Her eyes were dark and steady, and her short black hair was streaked with early gray. Hana had served in the United Earth Fleet for 15 years. She had commanded patrol vessels and escort ships. She had led rescue missions and diplomatic transports, but she had never seen combat. Not real combat. Not the kind that her instructors had whispered about in the dark corners of the academy. Today, that was going to change. Behind her, the maintenance crews were already flooding into the hangar. Thousands of men and women in work suits, carrying tools and equipment that had been stored almost as long as the ships themselves. They moved with purpose, following procedures that had been passed down through generations of soldiers who had hoped these procedures would never be needed. Hana walked forward into the darkness. Her flashlight cut through the dust, revealing shapes that made her breath catch in her throat. The ships were beautiful. They sat in rows like sleeping giants, their hulls dark and silent. The nearest one was the Hammer of Earth, a battleship of the old Titan class. It was 3 kilometers long from bow to stern, covered in weapon systems that made modern ships look like toys. Its armor was 10 meters thick in places, designed to withstand impacts that would vaporize lesser vessels. And it was hers now. Hana placed her hand on the cold metal of the hull. For a moment, she felt a connection to all the men and women who had built this ship, who had served on it, who had been ready to die for it. They were all gone now, their names recorded only in classified files that most people would never see. But the ship remained, waiting. Captain Yoon. Hana turned to find her executive officer approaching. Lieutenant Nam Wu was a young man, barely 30, with a round face that made him look even younger. But his eyes were sharp, and his record showed a brilliant mind for tactics and weapons systems. "The crews are beginning their checks," Wu reported. "Initial estimates suggest we can have the primary systems online within 48 hours. Full combat readiness in 72, as ordered." Hana nodded, "And the crew assignments?" Wu hesitated. This was the difficult part. "Most of our personnel have never served on ships like these, Captain. They have trained on simulators, studied the old manuals, but actual experience is limited." He paused. "We are going to war with crews who have never fired a weapon in anger." "Then they will learn," Hana said. "Humans have always learned fast when survival is at stake." She turned back to look at the ship, at the rows of weapon ports running along its sides like the teeth of some ancient predator. "My grandmother served on a vessel like this. She used to tell me stories when I was a child. I thought they were just fairy tales." "What kind of stories?" Hana was quiet for a moment. "She told me about the last great human war, about the battles that shook entire planets, about the weapons that could crack worlds like eggs." She looked at Wu, her eyes hard. "She told me that humans invented war, Lieutenant, that we perfected it when other species were still learning to count. She said that peace was our greatest achievement, but war was our greatest talent." Wu swallowed. "That is not what they teach in the academies." "No," Hana agreed. "They teach us that we are peaceful now, that the old ways are gone forever, that humanity has evolved beyond violence. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They are wrong. Across the solar system, other ships were waking up. On Mars, Colonel Bei Jin stood before his assembled troops. 200,000 soldiers, gathered in the vast underground training facilities that had been maintained in secret for decades. They wore combat armor that had never been used in real battle. They carried weapons that most of them had only seen in simulations. Jin was a man of 50 years, with a hard face and hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime of training. He had joined the military at 18, following a family tradition that stretched back for generations. His grandfather had fought in the last Great War. His father had trained in secret, preparing for a day that everyone hoped would never come. Now that day had arrived. "You have all seen the reports," Jin said, his voice carrying across the massive chamber. "The Velani are dying. The Krath swarm has killed 12 billion of them already, and they will not stop until every last one is dead. The Galactic Assembly has refused to help. They are too afraid, too weak, too comfortable in their peace." He paused, looking out at the sea of young faces. Most of these soldiers had never seen real combat. They had trained for it, prepared for it, but the reality was still an abstract concept to them. That was about to change. "Humanity has been at peace for 60 years, Jin continued. "The galaxy thinks we are soft. They think we have forgotten how to fight. They look at our small ships and our small territory, and they think we are just another young species, stumbling around in the dark." A low murmur ran through the assembled troops. "They are wrong." Jin's voice rose, filling the chamber with iron and fire. "We have not forgotten. We could never forget. War is in our blood. It is in our bones. It is in every cell of our bodies. Our ancestors spent 10,000 years killing each other in every way imaginable. They invented weapons that could destroy cities, nations, entire civilizations." He stepped forward, his eyes burning with intensity. "And now those weapons are pointed at someone else's enemy. Now those skills, those instincts, those terrible gifts that we have tried so hard to bury will be used to save an innocent species from extinction." Jin raised his fist. "We are the wolves of humanity. We have slept for 60 years, but now we wake. And God help anything that stands in our way." The roar that answered him shook the walls. In the command center of the Hammer of Earth, Hana received the reports from across the fleet. 37 capital ships were coming online, 112 cruisers, 400 destroyers and frigates, support vessels, troop transports, medical ships, supply craft. It was not a large fleet by galactic standards. The Krath swarm numbered in the millions. The Torani Empire could field 10,000 vessels without breaking a sweat. Even the smaller powers had fleets that dwarfed what humanity could muster. But numbers were not everything. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from Admiral T," Wu reported. Hana activated the main display. The Admiral's face appeared, older and more tired than she remembered. Behind him, she could see the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, flickering with the lights of systems coming online. "Captain Yoon," T said, "is the Hammer of Earth ready?" "We are running final checks now, Admiral. Combat readiness in 40 hours. T nodded. "Good. I am transmitting the battle plan to all ship commanders. Study it carefully. We will be outnumbered by a factor of almost 100,000 to 1. Hana felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face calm. "That is a significant disadvantage, Admiral." "Yes," T agreed. "For them." He leaned forward and something dark and ancient flickered in his eyes. "The Krath have never faced an enemy like us, Captain. They have conquered 1,000 species, but they have never fought humans. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not understand what we are." "And what are we, Admiral?" T smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "We are the species that invented the atomic bomb, the species that created nerve gas and biological weapons and machines designed only to kill. We are the species that nearly destroyed itself a dozen times because we could not stop fighting." His voice dropped to a whisper. "We are the most dangerous creatures this galaxy has ever seen. And now we are going to show the Krath why the universe should be very, very afraid of us." The display went dark. Hana sat in silence for a long moment, processing what she had just heard. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the weapons that could crack worlds, about the wars that had killed billions. She thought about the Velani children dying in the streets of their homeworld. And she felt something stir inside her, something that had been sleeping her whole life, waiting for this moment. An instinct older than civilization, older than humanity itself. The instinct of a predator who had finally found prey. "Wu," she said quietly, "accelerate the preparation schedule. I want combat readiness in 36 hours. "Captain, that may not be possible without cutting corners on safety protocols." Hana stood up, her eyes fixed on the stars visible through the viewport. Somewhere out there, innocent beings were dying. Somewhere out there, monsters thought they were invincible. "Then cut them," she said. "The Velani do not have time for safety protocols, and neither do we." The wolves were awake, and they were hungry. The Krath Overmind had existed for 3 million years. It was not a single creature, but a vast network of minds connected across the stars. Billions of warriors, millions of ships, all thinking with one purpose, all moving with one will. The Overmind had consumed 1,000 species. It had destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. It had spread across the galaxy like a disease, unstoppable and eternal. When the human fleet appeared in Velani space, the Overmind barely noticed. 47 ships, that was all. 47 small vessels emerging from something the humans called hyperspace. The Overmind compared this force to its own armada and found the mathematics amusing. 3 million bioships against 47. The odds were almost too absurd to calculate. The Overmind opened a communication channel, curious about these new creatures. It always liked to speak with its prey before the end. It made the consumption more satisfying. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kang T watched the holographic display with cold eyes. The Krath fleet filled the screen, a swarm of organic vessels that seemed to go on forever. Each bioship was a living creature, grown rather than built, with weapons that fired concentrated acid and claws that could tear through metal like paper. Commander Park Soo stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Behind them, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, monitoring systems and preparing for whatever was about to happen. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Krath command vessel," Lieutenant Cho Mina reported. T nodded. "Put it through." The holographic display shifted, and a face appeared, if it could be called a face. The Krath Overmind's avatar was a twisted mass of organic tissue, with dozens of eyes arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at. Its mouth was a vertical slit filled with teeth that seemed to move independently of each other. When it spoke, its voice was like wet meat being slapped against stone. "Little creatures," the Overmind said, "you bring toys against the infinite. We have watched you for some time. Young species, soft bodies, short lives. You have nothing that can harm us." T remained still. His face showed no emotion. "This is Admiral Kang T of the United Earth Fleet. You are ordered to withdraw from Velani space immediately. This is your only warning." The Overmind laughed. It was a horrible sound, like thousands of voices clicking and chittering in mockery. "A warning? From prey? How delightful. We will add your bones to our collection, little creature. Your species will make an interesting addition to our eternal feast." On the bridge, the crew exchanged nervous glances. They had all seen the numbers. They all knew that by any reasonable calculation, they should not be here. They should not be challenging a force that outnumbered them by tens of thousands to one. But Admiral T did not seem concerned. "You have been warned," he said simply. Then he muted the channel and turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Nam Wu. "Show them what toys can do." Wu's hands moved across his console. Deep in the hull of the Fury of Soul, a weapon that the galaxy had never seen began to charge. It was called a kinetic accelerator, but that name did not capture what it truly was. It was a simple concept, really. A rod of solid tungsten, 10 meters long and 1 meter wide, heavy and dense and hard. The accelerator wrapped around this rod and began to push it faster and faster. Magnetic fields pressed against the metal, accelerating it to speeds that seemed impossible. 0.1 of the speed of light, 0.2, 0.3. By the time the rod reached 0.7 C, it had more energy than a nuclear bomb. More energy than 100 nuclear bombs. More energy than anything the galaxy had ever used as a weapon. The Fury of Soul fired. The Krath command vessel was 50 kilometers long, a massive bioship that had been grown over thousands of years. It had armor made from organic compounds harder than diamond. It had regenerative systems that could heal damage faster than most weapons could inflict it. It had survived impacts from asteroids and energy beams, and everything else the galaxy had thrown at it. The tungsten rod hit it like the finger of God. There was no explosion in the traditional sense. There was simply a flash of light so bright that sensors across the entire star system went dark. The command vessel did not break apart or burn. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, 3 million years of accumulated biomass and intelligence. The next moment it was plasma, spreading outward in a wave of destruction that vaporized everything within 10,000 kilometers. 40,000 Krath bioships simply ceased to be. The laughter stopped. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral T watched the results on his display. His face still showed no emotion, but there was something in his eyes, something dark and satisfied. "All ships," he said quietly, "begin firing pattern Alpha." Across the human fleet, weapons began to speak. The Fury of Soul fired again, then again. Each tungsten rod was like a small sun being born and dying in an instant. The hammer of Earth unleashed a different kind of weapon, missiles that carried payloads designed to interfere with organic tissue. The bioships that were hit did not explode. They simply fell apart, their cellular bonds dissolving in seconds. The destroyers and frigates moved like wolves, circling the edges of the Krath formation and firing specialized rounds that punched through organic armor like it was not there. The cruisers coordinated their fire, concentrating on the larger bioships that seemed to serve as command nodes. And the Krath died. They died by the thousands, then by the tens of thousands, then by the hundreds of thousands. They tried to fight back, launching their acid weapons and sending waves of smaller attack craft toward the human ships. But the humans had anticipated this. Point defense systems tracked and destroyed incoming threats with mechanical precision. Energy shields absorbed the acid attacks without failing. For the first time in 3 million years, the Overmind felt something it did not recognize. Fear. "What are you?" it screamed across all frequencies. "What are these weapons? This is not possible. You are prey. You are soft little creatures. You cannot do this." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Su looked at Admiral T. "Should we respond, sir?" T considered for a moment. Then he opened the communication channel again. "You asked what we are," he said, his voice calm and cold. "We are human. Our species spent 10,000 years learning how to kill. We invented weapons that could destroy cities with a single blast. We created poisons that could wipe out entire populations. We built machines designed only for death." He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something ancient in his voice. Something that had been sleeping for 60 years and was now fully awake. "We tried to stop. We tried to become peaceful. We buried our weapons and swore we would never use them again. But you threatened innocent people. You killed children who could not fight back. You made us remember what we truly are." The Overmind's many eyes blinked in confusion and horror. What are you truly? T smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had finally stopped pretending to be prey. We are the wolf in sheep's clothing. We are the nightmare that other nightmares fear. We are the reason this galaxy should pray every day that humanity remains at peace. He leaned forward. And you just made us very, very angry. The battle lasted for 12 hours. By the end, the Krath had lost over 2 million ships. The human fleet had lost 3 destroyers and 1 cruiser. The math that had seemed so absurd at the beginning was being rewritten in fire and blood. Captain Yoon Hana stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Earth, watching the retreating Krath forces. Her ship was damaged in a dozen places, but it was still fighting, still hungry. They are running, Lieutenant Wu reported, disbelief clear in his voice. The Krath are actually running. Hana nodded slowly. She felt tired in a way she had never experienced before, but she also felt something else, something powerful and ancient. Pride. Contact Admiral T, she said. Tell him Phase 1 is complete, the swarm is broken. On the surface of Velin Prime, Ambassador Rilo stood in the ruins of the capital city. He had watched the battle on a damaged display, unable to believe what he was seeing. The creatures who had come to help them, the soft-looking beings with their small ships, had torn apart the Krath like they were nothing. He did not understand. He could not understand. What were these humans? Above him the sky was clearing. The fires were still burning, but the Krath ships that had darkened the heavens were gone. Dead or fled, it did not matter. For the first time in weeks, Rilo could see stars. And among those stars, he could see the human fleet. 47 ships that had challenged 3,000,001. What are you? He whispered to the sky. He would not have to wait long for an answer, because the humans were not finished. They had broken the swarm's attack, but the war was just beginning. And humanity had not shown its full strength yet, not even close. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Across 10,000 worlds, beings of every species gathered around screens and holographic displays. They watched recordings of the battle that had just taken place in Velin space. They saw the tungsten rods that moved faster than light and hit harder than exploding stars. They saw the Krath bioships dying by the millions. They saw the human fleet, small and outnumbered, cutting through the swarm like a blade through water. And they could not understand what they were seeing. The Torani Council met in emergency session. Their stone faces showed no emotion, but their voices carried something that sounded almost like fear. How is this possible? The High Speaker demanded. These humans have been among the stars for barely a century. Where did these weapons come from? No one had an answer. The Masari Collective sent urgent messages to their scientists and military advisors. Analyze everything, they ordered. Every weapon, every tactic, every piece of data. We need to understand what we are dealing with. The reports that came back were terrifying. The human weapons were not advanced in the way galactic species understood advancement. They were not elegant or sophisticated. They were brutal, simple, designed with one purpose in mind, which was to cause maximum destruction with minimum effort. The kinetic accelerators were just the beginning. The human ships also carried nuclear warheads enhanced with materials that multiplied their explosive yield. They carried biological agents that could target specific organic structures. They carried chemical compounds that could dissolve living tissue in seconds. And these were just the weapons they had brought with them. The intelligence reports suggested that humanity had more, much more. On Velin Prime, the second phase of the human operation was beginning. Colonel Bei Jin stood in the bay of a landing craft, watching the surface of the planet through a reinforced viewport. Below him, he could see the ruins of cities and the dark masses of Krath ground forces. The orbital battle had been won, but millions of Krath warriors still occupied Velin territory. They had to be removed. His soldiers filled the landing crafts behind him. 200,000 men and women in combat armor, carrying weapons that the Velani had no name for. Rifles that fired projectiles at supersonic speeds. Grenades that released shrapnel designed to tear through any material. Flamethrowers loaded with chemicals that would burn even in vacuum. And knives, simple steel blades for when everything else failed. "Colonel, we are beginning our descent," the pilot reported. Jin nodded. He turned to face his troops, his voice carrying through the communication system. "Listen carefully. The Velani are not warriors. They do not know how to fight. That means they do not know how to run, how to hide, how to protect themselves. Our mission is simple: kill the Krath, save the Velani, no hesitation, no mercy for the enemy." The landing crafts hit the atmosphere and began to burn through the sky. Private Lee Bora was 19 years old. She had joined the military because she wanted to travel among the stars, to see new worlds and meet new species. She had never imagined that she would find herself descending toward an alien planet with a rifle in her hands. Her squadmate, Sergeant O.D., was older and calmer. He had trained for 20 years, preparing for a day like this. His face showed no fear as the landing craft shook around them. "Stay close to me," Dee told her. "Do what I do, keep moving, keep shooting. Do not think about anything except the next step and the next target." Bora nodded, her throat too tight to speak. The landing craft hit the ground hard. The doors opened and Bora saw Velin Prime for the first time. It was a nightmare. The city around them had been beautiful once. She could see the remnants of crystal towers, now shattered and burning. Gardens that must have been filled with flowers were now covered with ash and debris, and everywhere there were bodies. Velani bodies, small, delicate creatures with golden eyes that stared at nothing. Adults, children, elders, all dead, all consumed by the swarm. Something stirred inside Bora, something she had not known existed, a cold fury that pushed away her fear and replaced it with determination. The Krath came at them almost immediately. Warriors bred for combat, their bodies covered in chitinous armor, their claws dripping with acid. They screamed as they charged, a sound that made Bora's bones vibrate. She raised her rifle and fired. The first Krath warrior died before it understood what was happening. The projectile punched through its armor like the armor was not there, exiting through its back in a spray of alien blood. The second warrior fell the same way, and the third, and the 10th. Around Bora, her squad was doing the same. Human soldiers firing with mechanical precision, cutting down the Krath charge with brutal efficiency. The aliens had expected prey. They had expected soft creatures that would run and hide and die easily. They had not expected this. Sergeant D moved forward, his flamethrower spraying chemical fire across a cluster of Krath trying to flank their position. The aliens burned, screaming in frequencies that hurt to hear. They tried to retreat, tried to regroup, but the humans did not give them time. The battle spread across the entire planet. In the ruins of the capital city, human forces pushed through street by street, clearing Krath nests with grenades and close combat. In the countryside, armored vehicles rolled across the landscape, their weapons turning Krath formations into burning wreckage. In the sky, human fighters hunted down the last remaining bioships that had survived the orbital battle. And in orbit, Captain Yoon Hana coordinated the bombardment. She stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Earth, watching the tactical display with cold eyes. Her ship had been repaired enough to continue fighting, and now it was providing support for the ground forces below. "Captain, we have confirmed Krath concentrations in Grid 7 through 12, Lieutenant Wu reported. "Ground forces are requesting orbital strike support." Hana looked at the display. The grids in question contained what remained of a major Krath hive. Millions of warriors, countless bioships, enough force to threaten the entire planet if left unchecked. "Adjust targeting solution," she said. "Grid 7 through 12. Wu hesitated. Captain, that is approximately 2 million ships and an unknown number of ground forces. Hana turned to look at him. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard as steel. I am aware. She pressed the firing command. Execute. The sky turned white. Ambassador Rilo had found shelter in the basement of a ruined building. He was hiding there with a group of survivors, mostly children who had lost their parents in the Krath attack. They huddled together in the darkness, too afraid to make a sound. Then the humans came. The wall of the basement exploded inward, and for a terrible moment, Rilo thought the Krath had found them. But instead of alien warriors, he saw a young human soldier. A female, barely more than a child herself by human standards. Her armor was covered in blood and ash, and her eyes were wild with adrenaline. Behind her came another soldier, older, carrying a weapon that sprayed fire. Survivors, the young one shouted. We have survivors here. More humans poured into the basement, their weapons pointed outward, scanning for threats. One of them, a medic by the symbols on her armor, immediately began checking the Velani children for injuries. Rilo stared at them in disbelief. These creatures, these soft-looking beings from an unremarkable star, had done the impossible. They had come when no one else would. They had fought when everyone else refused. Private Bora noticed the old Velani watching her. She lowered her rifle and approached him carefully. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Rilo shook his head slowly. I am Ambassador Rilo. I was the one who asked for help. Bora paused, then she nodded. We heard you, Ambassador, we came. But why? Rilo whispered. Why did you come when everyone else refused? You are a young species, small, weak compared to the great powers. Why would you risk everything for strangers you had never met? Bora considered the question. She was tired, covered in alien blood, her hands still shaking from the combat she had just survived. But she found an answer somewhere inside herself. Because you needed help, she said simply, and we could give it, that is reason enough. Sergeant D appeared in the doorway. Bora, we need to move. There are more survivors in the next sector. Bora nodded. She looked at Rilo one more time. Stay here, more rescue teams are coming, you will be safe now. Then she was gone, running back into the burning city to save more lives. Rilo watched her go, his golden eyes filled with tears. He had spent his entire life studying other species, learning their cultures and their customs. He had thought he understood the galaxy. He had been wrong. These humans were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They were not the strongest or the oldest or the most advanced, but they had something that no other species seemed to possess. They cared about people they had never met. They fought for people who could never repay them. They bled for strangers. And they were terrifying in their compassion as much as in their violence. Above the planet the battle continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Krath swarm was dying, and humanity was just getting started. The Krath swarm surrendered on the 47th day. Admiral Kang T received the transmission on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by his exhausted crew. They had been fighting for almost 7 weeks, pushing deeper into Krath territory with each passing day. What had started as a rescue mission had become something much larger, a campaign that would reshape the galaxy forever. The message came from the Overmind itself. Its voice was different now. The arrogance was gone. The laughter was silent. What remained was something the Krath had never known before. Defeat. We surrender, the Overmind said. We offer unconditional submission to humanity. Our warriors will lay down their weapons. Our ships will cease all hostile actions. We ask only for mercy. T listened in silence. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged glances of disbelief. In 3 million years, the Krath had never surrendered. They had never even considered the possibility. They had been the ultimate predators, the top of the galactic food chain. until they met humanity. Your surrender is accepted, T said finally. You will withdraw all forces from Velani space immediately. You will release all prisoners taken during your attacks. You will provide medical aid to all survivors. It will be done, the Overmind replied. Its voice was hollow, broken. But we must know, we must understand. What are you? In 3 million years we have never encountered anything like you. You are small, short-lived. Your ships are few and your territory is tiny, yet you destroyed us. T considered the question for a long moment. He thought about everything that had happened. The battles, the deaths, the terrible weapons that his species had created and hoped never to use. He thought about the Velani children he had seen rescued from the ruins of their cities, about the gratitude in their golden eyes, about the way they had reached out to touch the human soldiers, unable to believe that help had finally come. We are human, he said at last. We are the species that learned to kill before we learned to write. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare, developing weapons so terrible that we nearly destroyed ourselves. And when we finally found peace, when we finally put away our swords, we made a promise. He paused, his dark eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the viewscreen. We promised that we would never stand by while innocents suffered. We promised that our terrible gifts would be used to protect the weak, not to prey upon them. We promised that the galaxy would have nothing to fear from us, as long as it did not give us a reason to remember what we truly are. The Overmind was silent for a long moment. And what are you truly? T smiled, but there was no joy in it. We are the ones who come when no one else will. We are the nightmare that protects other nightmares from themselves. We are humanity, and you made the mistake of hurting people we care about. The transmission ended. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. On the Torani homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. They reviewed the intelligence reports, the combat footage, the analysis of human weapons and tactics, and they reached a conclusion that would have seemed absurd just 2 months before. Humanity was the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not the largest, not the oldest, not the most advanced, but the most dangerous, because while other species had evolved beyond warfare, had become civilized and peaceful, humanity had simply chosen peace, and they could choose differently at any time. The Masari Collective sent a formal diplomatic message to Earth, requesting alliance negotiations. The Orvex did the same. Species that had ignored humanity for a century suddenly wanted to be friends. But it was the Velani response that mattered most. Ambassador Rilo had survived the war. He had seen his world burn and then be saved. He had watched human soldiers die protecting Velani civilians they had never met. He had witnessed something that changed his understanding of the universe forever. When the fighting finally ended, he traveled to the Indomitable to meet with Admiral T in person. The two of them stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Velani homeworld was visible in the distance, scarred but healing. Human ships still patrolled the system, standing guard against any remaining threats. We asked for assistance, Rilo said softly, his golden eyes glistening with tears. We hoped for compassion. We prayed for salvation. He placed one trembling hand on T's shoulder. We never imagined that beings like you existed. T was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face the old ambassador. We are not special, Rilo. We are just stubborn. We could not stand by and watch your people die. It goes against everything we believe. But why? Rilo asked. Why did you come when everyone else refused? You had nothing to gain. You risked everything for strangers. T thought about the question. He thought about his grandmother who had served in the last great human war. She had told him stories about the battles, about the death, about the weapons that could crack worlds. But she had also told him something else. My grandmother used to say that humanity's greatest weakness is also our greatest strength, T said. We feel too much. We care too much. We cannot look at suffering without wanting to stop it, even when it would be easier to look away. He turned back to the stars. We are not perfect, Ambassador. We have done terrible things to each other over our history. We have invented weapons that should never exist. We have nearly destroyed ourselves more times than I can count. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft. But we also invented compassion. We invented mercy. We invented the idea that the strong should protect the weak, even at great cost to themselves. And those things are as much a part of us as the violence. Rilo was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The Velani will never forget what you have done for us, he said. As long as our species exists, we will remember the humans who came when no one else would. We will tell our children about the wolves who saved us from the darkness. Commander Park Sue entered the observation deck, a datapad in her hands. Admiral, we are receiving transmissions from 17 species. They are all asking the same thing. T turned to face her. What is that? Sue could not hide a small smile. They want to know if Earth accepts alliance requests. T looked at Rilo, then back at Sue. He thought about everything that had happened, about the war they had just won, about the message they had sent to the galaxy. Humanity was dangerous, but humanity was also kind. Humanity was terrifying, but humanity was also gentle. And maybe, just maybe, that combination was exactly what the galaxy needed. Tell them we are open to discussions, T said. But make sure they understand something first. We are not conquerors. We are not looking for power or territory or resources. We will be friends to those who treat us fairly and protectors to those who need our help. He paused and his eyes hardened. But if anyone threatens the innocent, if anyone preys upon the weak, they will learn why humanity should be feared. They will learn that the wolves of Earth never truly sleep. And they will learn that mercy is something we choose to give, not something we can be forced to show. Sue nodded and left to send the messages. Rilo stayed on the observation deck with T for a while longer. They watched the stars together, two beings from species that could not have been more different, yet had found common ground in the most unlikely circumstances. What will humanity do now? Rilo asked eventually. T considered the question. We will go home, we will rebuild our fleet, we will train the next generation of soldiers. He smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. And we will wait, because someday someone else will need help, and when they do, we will come. The wolves of Saul, Rilo murmured. Some call us that, T agreed. Others call us guardians, warriors, protectors. He turned to face Rilo one last time. But to the people we help, we prefer to be called something simpler, something that means the same thing in every language we have ever known. And what is that? T smiled, and in that smile was everything humanity had ever been, and everything it hoped to become. Friends. In the decades that followed, humanity would become one of the great powers of the galaxy, not through conquest or intimidation, but through an endless willingness to help those who could not help themselves. They built hospitals on worlds they had never heard of. They sent teachers to species that were just learning to reach for the stars. They stood guard over trade routes and protected travelers from pirates and raiders. And whenever darkness threatened, whenever some predator thought it could prey upon the weak without consequence, humanity remembered. They remembered the weapons buried beneath Luna. They remembered the warriors trained on Mars. They remembered the terrible gifts that their ancestors had given them, the capacity for violence that slept in every human heart. And they used those gifts to keep the darkness at bay. The Velani survived. They rebuilt their cities and mourned their dead. They planted new gardens and raised new children. And every year, on the anniversary of the day humanity came to save them, they held a celebration. They called it the Festival of the Wolves. And somewhere in the stars, humanity smiled and kept watching. Because that was what friends did.